Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is Overland Weekly, episode number 20. My name is Davey. I am your host for this episode, and I've got a couple of guests with me today. I have Mr. Andrew Decker and Mr. Nick Jaynes. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So Andrew is a lead applications engineer. Is that the correct title?
Yep.
Is it Bridgestone, Firestone, or Bridgestone Americas now? I want to make sure I get this right.
Bridgestone Americas, and then Firestone and Bridgestone are brands.
Gotcha. All right. And then Nick is the founder of Differential Communications, which is an overland and off-road public relations firm who happens to have Firestone as a client. And you guys are based in the Pacific Northwest, correct?
That's right. Yes, sir.
Awesome. So this came together. My friend Aubrey Swinson, who some of you guys in this part of the country may know. Aubrey works for Firestone as his day job, and he's got 100 series that he wheels a lot of events around here. And Aubrey said, you really need to get somebody from some Firestone on. And Firestone introduced me to Nick, and Nick to Andrew, and then Nick said, well, hey, if you're going to talk off-roading and tires, I like that too. So can I come on and join you? And I said, yeah, absolutely. The more the merrier. So that's how we've assembled this group today. And yeah, if you haven't guessed, today's topic is all things tires. So it's just a couple of days before Thanksgiving as we're recording this. And we've kind of had a very mild fall here. And now it's starting to feel like winter may be coming. And for me, that's like the signal that it's kind of trail season and camping and all those things that go with it, and a lot of events coming up. What about you guys? Do you all have any rides or anything on the horizon in the next couple of months?
Well, this weekend, my friends and I are going out. We're going to go snow wheeling, and up here, I don't know about where you guys live, but here in Oregon, you can buy a $5 tag and go get your own Christmas tree from the National Forest.
Oh, so that's cool.
We go and do that.
We don't have National Forest, and we don't have snow. Well, we don't have snow yet. We might get like 3 inches in a couple of months, and everybody will freak out. But yeah. What about you, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, being here in Central Tennessee now, it's the time for a break from the heat, so it's time to get out there. And I know my wife and I will probably be out camping or riding our dirt bikes, so it is definitely time to get out and hit the trails and enjoy the woods.
Nice. Guys, before we dive into to tires, why don't you both give us kind of just a rundown of your rig or rigs that you like to get out there and wheel? Nick, I'll let you kick it off.
Oh gosh. Well, I don't know if we have time for all of my rigs. We take up the whole show.
We'll go with a couple of your primaries. Yeah.
Primaries. Okay. Gosh, one of my the two in my driveway right now, and then I guess I'll go one in the garage and make it pretty quick. I got a 22 Ford Ranger that's fairly well built up. I don't know if you want me to go to all the specs and all the details, but the one next to it, the 23 Super Duty with the 7.3 Godzilla gasoline big block V8, that's an extra cab FX4 that I removed the entire bed and replaced it with a MITS alloy tray and canopy.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's clean.
Yeah, that's the long distance, long term expedition rig, and that's riding on Firestone Destination MT2 and 37-inch by 12.5, 17, and that's pretty much an unstoppable, super capable camping rig. And then I've got a 79 Scout 2 that I'm rebuilding in my garage. That's behind those. So, but it has no interior right now, so I won't be taking that this weekend.
A lot of Scout buzz and excitement lately with the new one coming out. They unveiled it just down the road from where I am now, that new one. So, it looks exciting. It looks a lot more exciting than some of the EVs we've seen. So I'm anxious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I don't want to hijack it too long, but I think I was worried they weren't going to stay true to the vibe, the essence of the truck, and I think they really did that, at least in aesthetics.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, they got me hooked because I put a deposit down. So.
Oh, okay. We didn't even plan this. This is becoming a scout show now. No, that's so you're all in, Andrew.
Yeah, I think I like the serial EV concept. With the range extender. Being able to actually not have range anxiety, I think it would be cool. Especially if you get out in the woods, you don't have to worry about finding a fast charger or whatever. You can still just carry gas cans with you if you needed to.
I'm really excited about those new gasoline engines. It seems like it's going to be the wave of the future. I mean, there's gas stations everywhere. It's amazing. There's no range anxiety.
It's just such a novel concept.
Isn't it crazy, guys?
All right. So you put a deposit down for the Scout. What's your current or past rig, Andrew?
Current rig is a 2009 GX 470.
Okay.
It's pretty much stock, at least underneath, but it's got skid plates, rock sliders. I did a DIY kind of shelf sleeping platform in the back. It's got a roof rack with awning and stuff on top, but it's the rig that gets my wife and I where we want to go and then to the coffee shop afterwards. So, and it's on Firestone Destination MT2s, so it definitely doesn't look like a mall crawler.
Well, those GXs are a heck of a value for trucks, especially that generation. And shout out to our friend Patrick Perry from Perry Parts that just swapped the rear end in his GX, put the new modified rear end, removed the 8-inch, and has the 9.5-inch under there after he broke the 8-inch for the third time last time we were out. So there is a solution now. He's got it up on his blog. If you're a GX guy, go to Perry Parts and read up on the axle swap. All right. Well, diving into our actual topic for the day to be addressed. I had told the guys, I said, I think our audience is pretty intelligent. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but I think we got some pretty smart listeners. So I don't want to make this too basic, and I want to try to get into some of the nitty gritty. But let's start kind of at a foundational knowledge level, Andrew, and let's start with a modern radial tire versus a bias ply tire. I'm a little bit older than you, and I kind of grew up right at the tail end of bias ply still being a common thing in not just heavy equipment, but in any tires. Now people are just used to radial tires, but break that down for us and what the differences are there.
Yeah, so the differences between a biased and a radial is pretty much how the tire's put together. Biased is one of the original tire technologies. It was originally fabric, which was like cotton fabric that was coated in rubber, and there were layers of those put on, and they were actually put on at an angle or a bias. So that's where the name comes from. And there were several layers of those needed, many, many layers in order to get the strength, especially for heavier vehicles. And so they were thick, they were heavy. They were very much a balloon shape early on before belted bias became a thing, which is when you started getting your low profiles, which are nowhere near as low profile as what we have now. But then with the advent of radials, what tire manufacturers were able to do were take cords and go directly from one bead to another at a 90-degree angle. So if you look at an X-ray of the tire, it lines up with a radius line, hence radial. Uses a lot more modern materials, usually nylon or polyester cords, sometimes steel, depending on the application. And so there's a lot less material because you usually have 2, maybe 3 body plies in a radial rather than 6, 8, 10 or more in a bias ply tire. So they're a lot lighter. They generate less heat. They have better rolling resistance. And they, which is especially heat is a big enemy of vulcanized rubber. So, they're able to run faster, and handle that heat, that speed. So radials are, obviously very much the go-to for current passenger cars and stuff like that. But bias still has their place, especially in agriculture and large earth moving equipment where they're carrying like absolutely immense loads at really low speeds. So they're not generating that heat, and they're able to use that strength of the bias ply tire, to carry those loads.
Gotcha. Yeah. How about let's talk a little bit about pressure. If you are new to off-roading or overlanding, this always seems to confuse new folks that we like to let air out of the tires before the day even begins. But talk a little bit about air pressure and how that works on different terrains with different tire types.
Yeah, so airing down especially is a little bit of a touchy subject, I guess, coming from a tire manufacturer. It's an interesting fact. We do all of our off-road testing at Placard. We don't air down for doing off-road testing. It just kind of removes one more variable. I always try to tell people, use airing down as a tool in your toolbox. If you immediately, drive onto dirt, shift into 4-low, triple locked, air down, and then you get stuck, you don't have anything left unless you have like a winch. So, there are some benefits to airing down. It adds a little bit of comfort, bump absorption. So on rougher, rockier trails, it can be useful for that. Saves your back. But one thing to keep in mind is the air is what actually carries the load in a tire. It is what gives that tire its spring rate. So, and it's also what dissipates the heat inside the tire. So the more air you let out, the more heat it will generate and not be able to dissipate it. So you need to really bring the speeds down. And always have a way to air back up. Don't air down if you don't have a compressor.
Right.
So that's kind of a given. If even just a little bit of time on the highway at really low pressures, you can damage that tire internally and not know it, and that damage doesn't get healed. It's compounding. So I don't really have a line in the sand of what you should air down to. It's very application and situationally dependent, but just some things to keep in mind is, you let the air down, you better slow down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, speed has to go along with that. And like you said, and there is, I understand it from a manufacturer's perspective. I'm the guy that, I'm going to drop to 15 or 16 as soon as I'm at the trailhead, but that suits the terrain that I'm tackling as well. If you're tackling different terrain, or if you're in sand, or if you're in snow, it's going to be a totally different story than if you're rock crawling somewhere. So yeah, absolutely.
I'll just jump in and say,
yeah, go ahead, Nick.
We've heard people say that airing down to 18 doubles your traction and things like that. There's just so many misnomers and misunderstandings out there that I think, especially if you're thinking, and I can't speak for other tires, but obviously, as Andrew has proved in his testing, that your tire is very, very capable at the standard Placard recommended pressure. So yeah, right. To his point, and he's actually sort of changed a lot of my thinking on it too, because I was like you, I was whacking it down to 15, as soon as we turned onto the dirt. But obviously mechanical and personal sympathy, you want to give a little bit more cushion when you're hitting rocks and ruts and things like that. So, but now I don't think of it as, oh my God, I'm not going to get anywhere without this. So it is, and it's sidewall size and temperature outside and the material. It's just like, there's so many dang variables. And so if anyone is giving you, if they have a printout on a little card of like the rules for airing down, they're lying to you, right?
I do. We can agree on that. And no, I don't think it doubles your traction. I wish that was the case. That'd be awesome if you could, just double the traction. It's definitely around here with our terrain. It's a big comfort thing, especially if you're picking up the pace on the rocks a little bit more.
When I take my GX like up to Land Between the Lakes up on the Kentucky border, there's a lot of small baseball sized rocks and stuff like that. And I let a little bit of pressure out. I won't go down super far, but it's definitely a comfort thing.
Along with that, let's just talk about kind of elephant in the room as far as terrain and an all-terrain tire versus a mud tire versus an all-season tire. I'm of the opinion, and this is Davey's opinion, and a manufacturer may disagree, that an all-terrain tire means all terrains except mud, because from personal experience, when you get in Alabama mud or red clay down in Georgia with an all-terrain, it just doesn't clean out. It's just going to be slick as snot. But is there an all-terrain on the market that is truly that can truly go from the mud to the dry and perform well in both, or is it always a give and take?
It's definitely a balancing act with the all-terrains. Yeah, I agree. Down here in the Southeast, like, you get in that real heavy clay mud, it's going to pack up any tire. Even some MTs just get absolutely turned into mud balls. We have seen an expansion of ATs or all-terrain tires that start to bridge that traditional gap of ATs to MTs, from hybrid terrain, rugged terrain, whatever you want to call it. But again, it's a balancing act of making it tire more aggressive, but also keeping the road manners. And one of the big trade-offs is, if you want a tire to be good in mud, you want it to eject that mud from the pattern and re-expose those lugs. But that's the opposite of what you want to do for snow. In snow, you want the pattern to hold some snow, because the best traction in snow is snow on snow. Now, not completely covering it, but packing the grooves up. That's what good winter tires do. So if a tire is good at ejecting things from the pattern, it's not going to hold any snow, so it won't necessarily be good in the snow. So there's a lot of balancing. The Firestone Destination XT, I think, strikes a really good balance. It does most of what our MT does. And Nick can definitely attest to it. He's driven both through pretty much everything. It might take a little more skill to drive the XT through some deep stuff or some extra tools that maybe the MT2 would just walk right through. But it does quite a bit. And we test over in North Carolina, so we're very familiar with the red clay that's over in Carolinas.
Yeah, he will. He just did some testing too, and I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that yet. But one of the great things about having Decker on the team is super knowledgeable. But he's also out there every year retesting the tires and putting them against competitors. And I just saw his data, and the XT did very well in the mud. It always does. It always has. And even against new competitors, it really stands out. I can speak from my experience. We just had some of our brand ambassadors, Talon Sai and Micah Weber from Overland Under Budget, out in East Carolina for a week. And every single truck, there was 6 trucks with us. Every truck but Micah's was on the MT2. He was on XT. And we were down in some canyon lands, and it rained, and that the earth out there turns into like Vaseline when it rains. So it was actually pretty hairy. But he is a Ranger, a 2019 Ranger.
Yeah, the wrecked one. I think that he's
right
back together. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, he went everywhere that we went in the MT2s without skipping a beat. And Talon had actually, as it started raining, Talon's like, "Man, got on the radio. I'm so glad I have the MT2s." And I was like, "Well, you'll see. You're about to see how well the XT does in the mud." So, yes, and Decker always puts it to me, like, when it's the deep stuff, you want the MT, the max traction. But when it's not super deep, the XT has never skipped a beat for us.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that testing, if we can. Andrew, what about just walk us through that process when a manufacturer tests a tire? I want to know both in the lab and in the field what that looks like. Yeah,
so the lab, which our development center here in the Americas is in Akron, Ohio. The labs that they have there, a lot of what they do is regulatory certification stuff. So they'll certify load rating, speed rating, all the DOT certs that go along with getting that DOT stamp on the sidewall. And they'll even do stuff like noise testing in some of the anechoic chambers that we have there, the completely silent rooms that have all the microphones. And then we have some outdoor lab proving ground kind of things where we'll do, controlled wet handling, dry handling, just stopping distances, that kind of stuff. And they're all very controlled environments. And then what I do a lot of is like we'll take our off-road tires out to the Uwharrie National Forest, like I said, over in North Carolina. We test with Overland experts. So shout out to the OEX crew. Great group of people to work over there with. They've got their private property, but we also test in the forest on some of the trails. And we just really try to do real world testing. So we'll go out, we'll take, 2 identical 100 series Land Cruisers, put tires on them and test them back to back against a list of metrics that we have that we've developed over the years. And, we'll even do try to get some real world feedback by seeding tires out to media, and other power users to be able to get maybe long-term use data, from people who use the products all the time. And then we do our winter testing in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, at the Bridgestone Winter Driving School, as well as up in the UP, up in Michigan. So we trying to test worst case real world environments where our tires are being put into service.
So before a tire goes into service or goes for sale, what is that timeline like? Is it a year? Is it 6 months, 2 years? How long does a tire have to go through testing before you guys say, okay, this is ready?
So the design cycle is really long for some of our products. It's several years, sometimes upwards of like 10.
Wow.
And in that there is initial design and development. That's all like, on the computer, that kind of stuff. And then we will have a couple years of testing prototypes. And then by the time I get it, it's pretty mature and ready to be, production spun up, and that can take a while as well. So, by the time I get it, I have a finished product, or I'm doing benchmarking of our current products against new competitors as well.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're getting it kind of towards the end of the design cycle, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But can you give an overview of what that cycle looks like, kind of from, I'm assuming, kind of the early sketches, new ideas to the final product? Like, does it go through? I'm assuming we're not starting on pen and paper now. I'm assuming there's some type of 3D modeling, and then it goes into a prototype and then that kind of thing.
Well, I'm not sure about all of our design engineers. There may be some that still do napkin sketches, but
hey, if it works, yeah.
But I mean, computers are a big part of it.
Right.
A lot of modeling softwares, being able to do that. We're not breaking new ground as an industry, really. So, like, for our company, we're replacing old products or trying to fill holes in our portfolio. When we decide to come up with a new product. And then, we'll look at the competitive landscape. What are other companies doing? What have the requirements changed in the segment we're trying to go after? What are the customers requiring out of these tires now? Because it might have been different than when we introduced the last product. Like especially for like all terrains. Everybody, it was much more mild. Now people want slightly more aggressive, and they want them to be the do-all tire. So it's kind of changed. And then our design engineers, like I said, they'll start iterating. They'll do a first pass, they'll build some prototypes, they'll keep iterating. And during all of this, we'll have our designers also take into account like what the aesthetic of the tire needs to look like. And eventually, everybody signs off on it, and it starts getting industrialized and spun up for production.
Gotcha. Okay. We talked a little bit. I mean, we were talking about pressure, and we were talking about heat and those kind of things. So for a lot of folks, they do a lot of people have a daily driver that's doing double duty, right? They're wheeling it on the weekend and they're driving it to work Monday morning, and they've got to find that balance. Do you have any kind of insider tips for maximizing the life of a tire that's living a double life? Because that's not easy on a tire.
No, it's definitely not easy for sure. Especially the way some of us drive off-road. So the biggest thing is inflation pressure and rotation, rotation on the vehicle. So proper inflation pressure is going to keep that tire contact patch the correct shape on the pavement. It's going to help reduce irregular wear and give you as much wear life as possible. And then regular rotation, every oil change, 7,000 miles, however, something like that, is especially important, especially for deep tread tires, your MTs and stuff like
Sure.
that. Rotating those regularly, getting them rolling in a different direction on the other side of the vehicle helps even out any irregular wear you might have, and just really helps get them, as much wear life as you can. I'm crazy. I rotate my tires every 2,500 miles just because I want to keep my MTs as smooth as possible.
You are crazy, yeah. But yeah, it's I'm impressed. We'll put it that way. That's dedication. So,
I think touching on Sensi, you said I don't want to go too far into the weeds, but if you said I believe you that your audience is smart. I think maybe Andrew, it might be interesting to go a little more in depth because of an example like that I found across all my different rigs, because they're all modified. None are running the same size tire, the same size wheel. And each tire requires different pressure for the application and the load rating too. And so even Andrew we were talking through one of my applications. It requires the vehicle requires the placard requires a much higher pressure than you might want to run on the MT2s that I have on that vehicle. And his warning to me was, well, you can do it, but they might start cupping is the wear.
Yeah, heel toe cupping. There's a lot of names for the kind of irregular wear where you can kind of see either the pattern get wavy or one block's higher than the next. If you're not running close to or exactly placard size, which probably very few of us are, determining what that actual pressure needs to be is something that that we've got tables. There's books, industry books that have load and inflation tables, and based off of the load the tire is going to carry, you can determine what the inflation pressure needs to be, and that's going to be unique for everybody's application. There's ways to figure out, especially if you go from a P metric tire, even on an F-150, it comes with P metric. Going to an LT, you might need to do a little bit of math to figure out what that new pressure needs to be, because the load and inflation curves aren't the same for P metric versus LT.
Can you, for folks that may not know, Andrew, break down the difference between a P metric or passenger tire and an LT tire?
So they're really just two sizing schemes. P, yes, usually stands for passenger, but you see it on some half-ton trucks, F-150, Silverado, stuff like that come up. It's the OE size. And then LT is light truck is what it stands for. The big differences between them, LT usually is able to carry much higher loads, but it requires a lot higher pressures. So on Nick's Super Duty, the pressures are 80 PSI.
Right.
You can't do that in a P metric tire. You have to have an LT to do those kind of pressures. So it's just it's two different sizing standards is what it is.
Gotcha. I think along with this part of the conversation, let's talk about balancing, about tire and wheel balancing, and your thoughts on that. Especially, I grew up where guys were, trying to balance these big 40 and 44-inch groundhogs or intercos or whatever it was, and they were putting everything from golf balls to buckshot, in the tire. And nowadays, balancing beads are kind of the, I don't want to say the rage, but you hear about that a lot right now. Talk to us about kind of liquid balancing versus bead balancing versus now we've got, advanced road force balancing. How do all those play out?
Yeah. So the the correct way, I guess, and the industry accepted way is to do spin balancing. Whether you do just spin balancing, which modern machines can get stuff really, really close just through spin. But then you also have road force, which is Hunter's technology, where it'll push on the tire, measure the spring rate as the tire rolls around. It'll try to account for that by strategically placed weights, or it'll tell you to dismount the tire, turn it however many degrees, and remount it. It's called force matching. And that will get it as perfect as possible. The bigger tires, 35s and up, they're going to require a lot of weight regardless of what you do, just because you've got the weight. The tread is the heaviest part. It's the farthest away. It's going to cause the most vibration if it's not even. And especially if you run like bead locks, like good luck getting them balanced.
Right.
So, that's where like the advent of the balance beads and stuff like that, people are trying to say, well, it'll move around as the tire moves around. Right. And I came from the commercial side. I was a field engineer dealing with semi-truck and bus tires for a number of years with Bridgestone when I first started. And balance media is all the rage in that industry.
Yes.
People take the big bag, they'll throw it in when they mount the tire, call it done. But anything you put in the tire has the potential to damage the inside of the tire, especially golf balls and buckshot and stuff like that. I've actually seen golf balls melted to the inside of a tire because it generates so much heat as that thing slings around. So definitely don't do that if you have other options. The physics might be there for the balance media. I'm still going to use weights when I can. I trust my balancer that I have. So
moral of the story that Andrew doesn't advise it, but if you do put golf balls in, film it and put it on Instagram so the rest of us can see it. So, all right, we're talking about vehicle weight, and that's obvious that that plays a factor in tires, and towing and the load plays a factor in that. What about suspension setups? When somebody's building out an off-road rig or kind of a double-duty overlanding rig, and maybe they're changing to a lighter suspension setup, are there factors in how they need to think about the total, I guess you could say total package between the suspension and their relationship with the wheels and their wheel and tire choices, particularly the weight of the wheels and tires?
That one's a little hard because once you start getting into modified, especially heavily modified vehicles, it really starts, it's becoming a whole system. You have to become a systems engineer almost to tie everything back together. Obviously, if you can run tires that work that are lighter and lighter wheels, right. Unsprung weight is, minimize that as much as you can. But going to 40s, you're not going to minimize anything.
Yeah, you stop worrying about an extra 5 pounds.
Yeah, each corner weighs 250 pounds. It's you can't get around that. So,
right.
The big thing when selecting your tires is what's the actual weight of the vehicle, because they're what's carrying the weight. Your suspension actually isn't carrying the weight; the tires are. So, you need to get a tire that's properly rated for what your rig weighs, plus the gear and people that you're going to carry. So
yeah, I guess that's kind of where I was going with that. Is people think a lot about the suspension as they're adding weight and adding rooftop tents and adding drawers and all these things to the setup, but that weight, the tires are where the weight meets the road, so to speak, not just the suspension. So it's another
your suspension suspends your vehicle above the tires. So right. Like what's actually carrying the load is the tires. And going from stock size to load range E tires doesn't magically mean your Tacoma can carry 5,000 pounds.
Where do you stand on the wide versus skinny debate?
I personally like the pizza cutter look.
Okay.
I think it is a lot of it's an aesthetic choice for a lot of it. Obviously, the wider you go, the more float you're going to get, which is why they're called flotation tires. They were originally developed for ag and forestry, where they don't want that soil compaction. They actually wanted the vehicles to float over very soft ground. A narrower tire will give you, better clearance and stuff like that because it's not as wide. But it will give you a longer contact patch, which might help
Right.
in whatever application you're doing. If you're looking to maximize your forward drive, a longer contact patch might actually be beneficial.
Yeah, that's the argument of our friend Kai from Tinker's Design that's been on the show. That I think surprised a lot of people is the data of the longer contact patch.
It's, if you think about it, I mean, people have been doing it for a very long time with winter tires. When you downsize a winter tire, usually you go taller and skinnier because you want that fore-aft traction. You want that longer contact patch.
Well, if you look at, we go back 80 years and you look at those World War II Jeeps, you look at the Willys. I mean, those tires, they couldn't have been 8 inches wide, right? Mm-hmm. On those tires then. So, yeah, interesting. We've talked a little bit about this, but temperature swings, right? If you've got a tire that you need to perform when it's 110 in the summer, and then maybe you're going out next way and it's getting really cold in the winter, do you have any advice for managing tire performance in extreme heat or extreme cold?
Yeah, so the thing is you need to set your pressures, quote, cold. Cold. Okay. When we talk about cold tire, that's relative. If it's Death Valley, cold tire will probably be close to 90 degrees. But what we define as a cold tire is something that hasn't been driven more than a mile or has been sitting for more than 3 hours. And that's the time to set your pressures. You don't want to set it after you just drove from, New York to LA. You don't want to adjust your pressures after that. So if you're driving in a situation where you go from really hot to really cold to the point where you've lost a bunch of pressure, and if you use a pressure gauge or you have your TPMS on your dash, yeah, you're probably going to want to top them up in the middle of that trip. But definitely don't let air out of a hot tire, after you've been driving on the road trying to, quote, correct it. Let the tire will naturally grow pressure, and it's designed to do that. So it's after the tire cools down, then you can adjust it.
Back on the off-road front, talk to us a little bit about sidewalls, because that seems to be a big topic of debate amongst the manufacturers, are the strength of the sidewalls, especially for somebody that's actually going to get out and put those things on some rocks. And, I've noticed kind of across the board in the last 10 years that sidewall strength seems to have improved. And maybe there's a new technology or a new compound or something that's going on there. But yes, granted, as soon as I say that, I'll probably rip one open here the next time I go out. But it seems like they're more abrasion and impact resistant, more forgiving than they used to be. What is it that makes a really good off-road sidewall in a tire?
It's mainly the progress that's been made in material science.
Okay.
Like you're saying, yes. From years past, we have made leaps and bounds forward with compound and materials. You might not think about it, but tire technology moves pretty quickly. Being inside, an insider to the industry and within a manufacturer, the compounding and stuff, it does move along fairly quickly. And we have made some pretty good strides towards cut chip resistance and stuff like that, stronger fabrics that we put in the tires. And that's allowed us to make sidewalls that don't have to be 3 inches thick in order to survive, rubbing up against a rock. Some of the sidewalls out there now are quite thin, but also quite robust. And I think a big thing that comes down to that is a lot of the rubbers and stuff that we put in there now.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing that the bias tires were always known for, was a little more strength on that sidewall. There's just more layers there.
Exactly.
But now with with, like you said, the material science updates, it seems like the radials are starting to give you that same strength without having to actually be 10 layers thick or whatever it is. Yeah.
But one of the other kind of misnomers, I guess, is that adding body plies does not necessarily mean your sidewall's stronger. 2 versus 3, there might be a little bit of strength there, but I haven't seen many cuts in a sidewall that stop at that last layer. If they're going through, it's going through. And since all the cords are all laying, in the same direction, there's probably an area where it's just pure rubber going right to the inside. So something will slip right in there and slip between all 3 body plies.
I do think it's worth jumping in, and Davey, you may know this, but I think a lot of the folks we encounter still don't. I even saw it in a news story from one of our competitors, Tire, bragging about 14 ply. It's like, it's not. It's not. You know what I mean? Like when we had a woman popped a tire on her P, F-150, P metric tire, and the tow truck guys are, well, it's only because these are only 4 ply. You need those 10 ply. And it's like, well, guess what, girl? I've got some news for you. You don't even have 4. So, go ahead.
So I was just going to say that
it's not like toilet paper is what we're saying here, guys. This is not.
No, well, so the ply rating is a holdover from bias. When someone says a 10 ply rated tire, that used to actually be a bias tire with 10 plies. Now 10 ply is equivalent to a load range E. And we use load range and load rating as a more accurate representation of what a tire is able to carry in the radial space now. So it's a bit of an archaic way of saying it, but we've got 10 ply rated tires and they've got 2 sidewall plies.
I see.
It's a bit of an older holdover, and some people get them confused because they use the same nomenclature. That's why I always talk about load rating whenever I talk about how much a tire can carry.
And I like to get it out there because people will think, they're coming off of a 10 ply tire, you name whatever it says on the side, the brand. And then they go, look at the Firestone Destination XT, fabulous, all-terrain tire. Well, this is only 2 ply. I can't go from 10 to 2. Like, well, you don't actually have 10. So I just want people, I feel like it's misleading, well, Bridgestone Firestone goes with the industry, standard. People are still looking backwards to the 1950s with their markings on the sidewall and making an unfair comparison in the marketplace. So I like to, sorry if I got on my soapbox here for a second, but
no, I think, hey, you gotta question the marketing guys, right? I mean, somebody, how about you still see, you don't see this as much, but you do see in some off-road tires, directional tires versus asymmetrical tires. What's the advantage, disadvantage there? Why do you see some tires built that way?
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, I don't see a lot of directional. I can only think of one asymmetric tire off the top of my head. A lot of the directional stuff you see in like the import brands, that go on your Brodozers. But yeah, I mean, directional and asymmetric patterns, they have their place. Directional, where the tire is designed to roll in a specific direction, allows the engineers to be able to design that fore-aft traction. You see that. I guess a good example would be like tractor pulls as the most extreme version of a directional off-road tire. It's meant to do one thing, and that's put the power to the ground in one direction. An asymmetric, it allows you kind of to do the same thing, but laterally. It allows you to tune inside and outside of the contact patch. You see it a lot in high-performance tires, where the outside shoulder will be a lot wider than everything else. So it's really in what the goals of the tire are and what they feel, the design engineers feel will meet that goal. I think seeing a lot of symmetrical, same side to side rolling in either direction off-road tires, what that allows you to have is consistent traction in like every direction. No matter which way you load it, it's going to act the same. It also helps with your regular wear because now you can rotate it around the vehicle. It can roll either way. With a directional tire, you can only swap it front to back. Asymmetric, you have to be careful what way you mount it. Make sure you don't mount it backwards, stuff like that. So symmetrical in the off-road space, I think, is definitely, why everyone's kind of gone that way, is because of, those kind of reasons. It's predictable and easier on the user.
Gotcha. One thing I wanted to ask you about, which I think is kind of a controversial subject, is siping. We see a lot of guys. You can go on YouTube and see guys talk about siping their tires. And again, this may be terrain dependent and what part of the country you're in and that kind of thing. But is siping something that that people, in your opinion, should be considering doing to their own tires, or should they trust the engineers and the factory siping that's there?
I would hope they would trust us. I mean, we pour a lot of R&D dollars and resources into designing our stuff. And I have to say, do not modify your tires. Not only is it going to void any warranty, but it's not safe to do. We put features there or not there for a reason. And sipes, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, I need more biting edges, and that's why they'll sipe a tire. And that does help on some smooth surfaces. You look at winter tires, they're very heavily siped to help with snow traction. And that's what sipes do. They give you a void for water and snow to evacuate out of the contact patch. But with the advent of like 3D sipes, where there's actual, the sipe does not just, it's not just a blade that goes straight into the tire. It actually has some geometry in there. It looks like an interlocking waffle iron, essentially. And what that allows is it allows you to have that void and all that, advantages of having all those sipes, but then under high loads, that 3D geometry will lock together and it'll allow the block to maintain some rigidity. So, we do all that in simulations and all that kind of stuff. So you go taking a hot knife to our tires, it just makes us cry.
All right. So you heard it from the source. No golf balls, no hot knives per decker on your tires.
It's also another holdover, I think, from it feels like the 70s to me.
Yeah, especially up north. I know that was a big thing from back in the day.
Yeah. I used to see it on when I back in my commercial days. There was a bus company up in Vermont they would sipe their tires, and the tires would get absolutely destroyed with irregular wear after just one season. But the guy was adamant, and he did it himself. And I was just like, please don't do this. But he just kept doing it.
I have a friend up in Montana who has, gotten another brand's MTs for years and then siped them. And he said, I wanted to get him some MT2s. And he said, I don't know, I want to sipe these. And I'm like, you don't need it. Like, trust me, with new compounds, especially, it's not the 1970s anymore. Like, especially our MT2s are so good in the wet and the snow, especially compared to modern competitors, but even, certainly old stuff. He likened it to, well, you get a Corvette, you're going to, soup up that LS. I said, that's not the same. It's like when Homer on The Simpsons put speed holes in the hood of his car.
Speed holes.
Yeah, speed holes. You're ruining it. It's not the same as tuning an LS, so
right.
Trust the engineers, please.
Well, you're talking about the 3D siping and kind of maybe things that you don't see to the eye that are engineered into the tread pattern. I mean, it's easy to look at a tire and go, oh, this has big lugs. This must be, a really good mud tire because it's got such deep lugs. But are there other less obvious factors in tread design nowadays, modern tread design, that you may not notice if you're just looking at a tire with the eyeball, that you can educate us on?
Well, Nick kind of hit on it. Kind of the one that you can't see, and it's really, really hard to differentiate, is the compound of what it's made out of. You can have treads that look chunky, and you're like, oh, that must be a good mud tire, or it's got, real tight interlocking pattern, like that's going to be good for, good rock traction or good snow traction, because of all the biting edges or whatever. But yeah, the compound, especially, like I said, the strides that we've made in our rubber technology really has driven forward. You could have, very similar tires with similar tread patterns, but if you've got different compounds, they could act drastically different. So that's one of the things, and it's, again, really hard for the consumer to differentiate because they don't know what's in the rubber, they don't know what's good. They have to rely on reviews, which isn't really standardized across the industry. It's not even counting what you find on YouTube.
Right.
But one of the other things to kind of look for is full depth features. So if those sipes or the slots and grooves will actually go all the way down to where the tire is considered like worn out, so they won't wear away, and you lose some of those features, which could degrade performance over the tire's life. If you find full depth sipes or full depth features, that will help maintain some of that new tire performance as the tire wears on.
Gotcha. Okay. Andrew, you were talking about load ratings, and we understand load ratings when you're talking about the weight of the load, whether it be in a pickup truck bed or whether it be that you're towing something. But let's talk about the load ratings on a tire and how that kind of helps or hurts in an off-road scenario. It would seem from a layperson that a heavier load rating is presumably going to be a stronger tire from a sidewall perspective, but maybe that is or maybe that isn't the case. But there's always a trade-off. So, what's your thoughts on load rating when you're looking at a truck that or a tire that you're gonna wheel?
So in the past, yes, the higher load ratings would probably adversely affect like ride quality, because the tire would have to have more material or thicker material. But with modern science and materials that we've put into the tire, we've been able to make stronger tires with the same amount of material, more or less, which allows you to not trade off that ride quality even at the higher load ratings. Now, getting a higher load rating than what you need isn't necessarily bad, but it doesn't magically increase your payload. You just need to keep in mind that there may be some ride quality degradation going to a higher load rating. And with a higher load rating, the tire is stronger because it's meant to hold more inflation pressure. The maximum inflation between a load range C and a load range E is different. Load range E will hold more pressure, so it does actually have to be stronger. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's more durable. The sidewall is not more puncture resistant because it can now carry more 80 psi or whatever. I'm wearing a Firestone hat, but I'll throw Bridgestone some love. Our new Dueler AT Ascent is an incredibly comfortable tire on the road, even when it's a load range E. It's one of the best tires I've ever driven on, when it comes to highway manners for a really capable AT tire. So it's like the perfect example of you don't have to trade off comfort for load carrying capacity.
Gotcha. Yeah, because that's, it has been a trade-off, and especially we talked about a truck that you're wheeling on the weekend and going to work. But then if you throw, it's a vehicle that you're also towing with, there's a whole third aspect that you got to think about that. And if you can find a tire that covers all three of those and does it comfortably, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's the Goldilocks,
Right.
mythical tire that does everything really well, and it also probably would last 100,000 miles, but everything's a trade-off, unfortunately.
This just came to mind when you talked about lasting 100,000 miles. Talk to us from an engineer's perspective about the age of tires, about the the DOT rating as far as tire age, because you will inevitably meet somebody that's running a 20-year-old set out on the trail that swears up and down there's nothing wrong with these tires. They're not dry rotted. I can't see anything wrong with them. I know you've got a thought on that, Andrew. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can probably see on my face. I'm like
getting
my eyes starting to twitch. So tire age is, or at least what the acceptable age out limit is basically by manufacturer. Bridgestone aligns with JATMA, which is the Japanese Tire Manufacturers Association, and we draw the line at 10 years.
Okay.
When a tire reaches 10 years, it should be taken out of service. It needs to be replaced. When you get to like 5 years, it should be inspected by a tire professional. And that includes possibly dismounting it and taking a look at the inside, because as air permeates from, being in the tire and out, as well as, like UV rays and ozone from the outside, it can degrade the tire internally, like where you can't actually see it. So it might not have the weather checking or the ozone cracking, but it could be degrading. And, you can tell by older tires, they do feel harder, because that's the ozone aging the rubber. So consult your tire manufacturer. Don't run it over 10 years. It's not worth the risk. Also, check your spare tires, because usually those are very old.
There are many folks that are guilty of that. Yeah. It's not a contest to see who can keep their original spare the longest. Yeah.
No.
All right. Well, you've kind of talked about some of the modern things as far as material science and 3D modeling and that kind of thing over the last few years. Are there any trends or advancements that you're excited about that maybe we don't see in production yet, but we'll see over here for the next few years, especially in the off-road scene?
I think we're already seeing it, but I'm excited to see where these hybrid rugged terrain, middle of the road, not an AT, but not quite an MT segment goes. A jack of all trades tire used to be a master of none.
Right. Yeah, that was my opinion.
But with improving compounds, like I've said, construction techniques and materials, the design that all the design tools that the manufacturers have at their disposal, it's now, instead of become two buckets, AT and MT, it's now more of a spectrum. It's what do you want out of the tire? And it's really been able to kind of get closer to that Goldilocks tire. But that's what I'm really excited to see, is how far can this get pushed? Can you have one tire that does it all?
I think that's what they need to call it. If they get it figured out, it needs to be the Goldilocks line. That's the market. Yeah. Goldilocks MTs. Yeah. All right. Well, one more question. Is there anything in your profession, and you've been doing this a while, that you think are common myths that people believe about tires, or maybe how they handle tire decisions, that you'd like to debunk?
There's a lot out there. We could probably do a whole podcast just on debunking tire myths, and maybe we could do that. But I think one of the things is there's a lot of groupthink, and people, get in echo chambers in a forum, or they've been a diehard one brand forever. And you need to see what else is out there, and take every review you see with a grain of salt, because like Nick has said, there's a lot of misconceptions about load rating and ply rating, versus what the actual tire is made out of. They're not the same. Adding plies does not necessarily mean it's more durable. And then airing down, there's a lot of misconceptions around airing down. You can be very conservative like me, and the way we do our testing, where you never really let anything out of the tire. But depending on what you go up, you might need to let air out in order to get that tire to conform around the obstacle or whatever. But you're not going to double your contact patch by taking 10 pounds out of the tire, or running 10 pounds in your tire. that's just not how it works. So I would like to see more people just, try to learn more and learn from, the people who actually, build these products. And, we try to do that, as Bridgestone, we try to educate as much as we can. But just, being able to think through it. And I don't think tires are really that complicated. So people try to make a mountain out of a molehill sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on and talking through this. And like you said, I know we only kind of scratched the surface, but I think you've provided some insight, and you've definitely provided some food for thought for a lot of us that have been doing this for several years. And it's easy to kind of get in a rut and believe what you've always believed, or make the same decision you did before, where the data and the science maybe will tell you something different nowadays. So that's been good. Before I let both of you go, though, we have to go through our rapid fire wrap up questions.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So, all right, Andrew, we'll start with you. First question: what is your go-to off-road trail snack?
I'm gonna have to say Twizzlers licorice nibs.
Oh, that's a very specific Twizzler licorice nibs. Those are the little short ones?
bite-sized ones. Yep.
Ah, okay. So now, do you turn down full-size Twizzlers if you can't get the nibs, or?
Yeah, I'll go to something else if I don't have nibs.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. All right, Nick, what do you got?
Oh, I'm gonna go in the similar candy aisle. I go peach rings.
Peach rings,
Yeah.
like the old school ones with the
candy.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
This is interesting. I don't know if we've had anybody go candy first. So okay. From the Firestone crowd is on the candy.
You've got a sweet tooth.
All right, Andrew, if you could only listen to one artist or one album while you're out on the trail for the day, what are you queuing up?
That's an easy one. Meteora by Linkin Park.
Meteor by Linkin Park. Okay. No, didn't even have to think about it.
No.
Nick, what you got?
Waylon Jennings, Dreaming My Dreams.
Oh, okay. Little old school country.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. All right. There's not much of that left in Nashville, but that's a whole nother rant for another show. Yeah, I could go on about that. All right. Important question here. Andrew, DeWalt or Milwaukee?
Team Yellow.
There we go. I like that answer.
Well,
All right,
you guys
Nick.
don't beat yourselves up. It's okay to be wrong.
He's got the red and black jacket on, so okay.
No. Yeah.
All right. All right. Here's the new one, Andrew. First vehicle that you ever owned?
This one was my first car. It was a 1989 Ford Tempo. It had 20,000 miles on it when I got it, because I got it from my great grandmother.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. The mythical inherited low mile.
Oh yeah. No,
it
did sit in the garage for 15 years before I got it. So.
And I bet you put a new set of tires on it before you drove it.
I didn't know anything about tires back then.
You put a sub in the trunk?
No, but it did replace all 4 speakers.
Okay.
Yeah, those paper cones, it just deteriorated.
Yeah.
Nick, what was your first one?
1983 Volvo 245 turbo wagon.
Ooh,
nice.
The tank.
Yeah.
All right. Wrapping up, another kind of controversial topic here. Rooftop tent or ground tent?
Can I say hammock?
Oh, wow. Door number 3 with the hammock. Okay. Yeah, we'll take hammock.
That'll be my choice.
I'm a rooftop tent guy myself.
You're all right. You're in. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, again, gentlemen, this has been fun. We may have to continue this and do a Decker's top 10 tire myths to be debunked as part 2. I like that. So
I might have to not wear the branded merchandise for that one.
Oh, okay. All right. That's fair enough. Yeah. Corporate, you can stop listening now. Well, no, good deal. I appreciate you guys making the time, and we'll call this one a wrap. Thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you
you very much.